Okay, so this is the Bible study for 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 12 through chapter 12, verse 25. So it's a longer text for today. The text says, "The people then said to Samuel, who was it that asked, 'Shall Saul reign over us?' Turn these men over to us so that we may put them to death." But Saul said, "No one will be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel." Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go up to Gilgal and there renew the kingship." So all the people went to Gilgal and made Saul king in the presence of the Lord. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings before the Lord, and Saul and all the Israelites held a great celebration. Samuel said to all Israel, "I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. As for me, I am old and gray, and my sons are here with you. I have been your leader from my youth until this day. Here I stand. Testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these things, I will make it right." "You have not cheated or oppressed us," they replied. "You have not taken anything from anyone's hand." Samuel said to them, "The Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed is witness this day, that you have not found anything in my hand." "He is witness," they said. Then Samuel said to the people, "It is the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron and brought your ancestors up out of Egypt. Now then, stand here, because I'm going to confront you with evidence before the Lord as to all the righteous acts performed by the Lord for you and your ancestors. After Jacob entered Egypt and cried to the Lord for help, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your ancestors out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God. So he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hands of the Philistines and the king of Moab, who fought against them. They cried out to the Lord and said, "We have sinned. We have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtaroths. But now deliver us from the hands of our enemies, and we will serve you." Then the Lord said to Jerubbaal, Barak, Jephthah, and Samuel, "And he delivered you from the hands of your enemies all around you, so that you lived in safety. But when you saw Nahash, king of the Ammonites, was moving against you, you said to me, 'No, we want a king to rule over us, even though the Lord our God, Lord your God, was your king. Now here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord and serve and obey him and do not rebel against his commands, and if both you and the king who reigns over you follow the Lord your God, good. But if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his commands, his hand will be against you, as it was against your ancestors. Now then, stand still and see this great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest now? I will call on the Lord to send thunder and rain, and you will realize that what an evil thing you did in the eyes of the Lord when you asked for a king." Then Samuel called on the Lord, and that same day the Lord sent thunder and rain. So all the people stood in awe of the Lord and of Samuel. The people all said to Samuel, "Pray to the Lord your God for your servants, so that we will not die, for we have added to all of our other sins the evil of asking for a king." "Do not be afraid," Samuel replied. "You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not turn away after useless idols. They can do no good, nor can they rescue you, because they are useless. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased to make you his own. As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you, and I will teach you the way that is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you. Yet if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will perish." Okay, that's a long text, and there's a lot of meat there. So I know we took a shorter text last week, and now here we are with a longer text. So remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study by going to www.abqnaz.org/alive and go down there to 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 12 through 12:25. And you'll find this and be able to download it and follow along with us as we ask and answer these questions about the text that we just read. So number one says, what happened in our last week's Bible study? A, the Ammonites came to attack Jabesh Gilead. That's true. B, the men of Jabesh were going to surrender, but the Ammonites would not accept surrender without jabbing out their right eye and bring disgrace on Israel. C, when Saul heard, the Spirit of the Lord came on him powerfully. And then D, 330,000 Israelite men slaughtered the Ammonites. And so obviously it was a short text, but a lot of things happened. And I would say even those four answers being true, they're a summary because there's some pretty important points that may have been left out there. But basically, what has happened in the past few Bible studies is that although Samuel has, Israel asked for a king, Samuel anointed Saul king in this really bizarre series of events. And then, Samuel sent Saul home and they went up to worship together and make sacrifice and stuff like that. But but in the end, Samuel or Saul is living and farming and the anointed king of Israel. But and there are people who are loyal to him, who went back with him to his town. But it doesn't appear that Saul's doing anything particularly kingly that we would think of as a king doing. It appears that Saul has sort of went back to his life and been a regular Israelite, albeit the one who has been appointed king, and is sort of sitting back and waiting for the time when God will establish him as king in some way. And then this past week's Bible study, when sort of Jabesh Gilead, this area on the outskirts of Israel across the Jordan River, was attacked by the neighbors, the Ammonites. They sent word, and Saul cut the oxen in half and sent pieces of it all over the place and said, this is what's going to happen to your ox if you don't come and fight with us. And so that's a good way to get 330,000 people to come fight, I guess. There's no good in just staying home, because you say, well, I'm sorry, I got to stay home, I got to farm, but you're not going to have any oxen to farm with if you don't show up. And so I may start doing that when people don't seem to want to come to church. Just cut some things in half, mail them out to them, and say, this will going to happen to your stuff too if you don't show up to church. No, I probably won't do that. But anyway, in this way, Saul united Israel behind him. There were people probably that were already loyal to him that would have showed up anyway. There were people that were obviously scoundrels. We've learned, we've been told, who didn't think that Saul could save them at all. Everybody is set right with this. And so now we enter into this week's text with sort of this confirmation after what's just happened, and Saul has led them in battle, and they've been victorious. All of a sudden, everybody's kind of like, oh, hey, maybe we were wrong. Maybe this is the guy. Maybe God's going to use him. And so that's kind of where we're at. Number 2 says, what happened in verse 11:12, see also 10:27. So in 11:12 it said, the people said to Samuel, Who was it that asked, shall Saul reign over us? Turn these men over to us that we may put them to death. So now Saul's king. It's clear that Saul's king. He's established himself. He is mighty king. He is king who has authority and has proven himself. And now remember in 1027, these folks that said, can this guy really save us? Can this fellow really do anything to help us? And clearly they were wrong. And in this day and age, if you were wrong, if you were a prophet who was a false prophet, you got stoned to death. If you're the person that says that guy, he's not going to be able to lead, he's that king, he can't really help us, then when you're proven wrong and the king really is in authority and is mighty, then usually the king puts you to death. And so people, it doesn't say what people, the people, maybe all the people, probably everybody but the people that said this, the people that were most enthusiastic about affirming Saul as king said, okay, now those detractors, those doubters, those haters, they need to be killed. We need to just do away with them. And then it says in the second part, how did Saul respond? In 11:13, he said, no one will be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel. Now he doesn't say anything about tomorrow, but I think the understanding is that there's grace given to those doubters. I think the idea is God has saved us. Maybe they weren't wrong to doubt me, but God has saved us today. So I'm not going to assert my authority even further by putting people to death. Rather, I'm going to spare their lives, which, by the way, if you go through scripture, is a very godly thing to do. It's a very Christ-like thing to do. It's despite what somebody has done to us. We see David doing a similar thing to the guy that was kicking dust on him while he was sort of being driven into exile from the kingdom. We see Christ turning the other cheek, instructing us to do the same. Christ not fighting back. So this is a biblical way to respond, but certainly very different. It would have been entirely fair and accepted for him to put these people to death, and it would not have been seen as unreasonable. But if Saul is to be a king after the will of God, then this is how he would respond. He would extend grace. So the third part says, what did Samuel do in 11:14 and 15? He said, come, let us go to Gilgal and there renew the kingship. So now that we're all on the same page, now that it's clear that Saul is and should be king, now let's go up together and let's have sort of a worship service, a coronation, where we offer sacrifices to God, thank him for what he's done, and affirm that this king that he has given us is from him, and let's confirm him as king. So that's what Samuel calls the people to do as the priest, as the religious leader. So number 3 says, what did Samuel say in 12:1 and 3? So he says, I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have this king as your leader. As for me, I'm old and gray, and my sons are here with you. I have been your leader from my youth until this day. Here I stand, testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these things, I will make it right. So he's coming to the end of his life, and certainly his reign as leader of Israel, as Saul is taking that leadership. Now you have a king. So it wasn't just, so during that time, when Saul was anointed king, but not really acting as king, who was Israel's leader, it seems that Samuel was still at some level Israel's leader. They didn't need a military leader. They didn't need a governmental leader in that way. And so Samuel's still functioning as leader. There's some division as to whether they're accepting Saul, this king that God has anointed now. So first they asked for a king, and that was rejecting God. And then when God gave them a king, they didn't fully and in a united way accept um, Saul as king. And so when they asked for something from God, he didn't like it, but he gave it to them anyway. Then they still didn't accept it. So it seems that Samuel has been the king. So now that they've confirmed Saul as king, or Samuel now has not been the king, he's been the leader of Israel, that he had been before, and now he's handing over the reins. But in doing so, he's saying, okay, at this point, um, if there's anything that I've done wrong, I want to make it right. And so here's your chance. If you think, and this is what God said, they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me. So God told them, it's not that you've done something wrong, Samuel. It's not that they're against you, they're against me. And so they've so that now Samuel has this opportunity to ask, who has something against me? What have I done wrong? Have I done anything? Now's your chance to share your grievances, and I will try to make that right. I think it seems like he doesn't want to go to his grave with people holding things against him, and with some wrongdoing that's unconfessed and unaccepted. And so he lays it out here. And the second part says, how did the people respond in 12:4? They said, you have not cheated or oppressed us. You have not taken anything from anyone's hand. So now they're testifying in front of everyone and in front of this new king, that there is nothing that they have against Samuel, their previous leader. And I don't know if this is doesn't seem to be something that's common practice today. I think most people would not stand up to this sort of analysis, or but if we had political leaders that would stand up at the end of their time and say, what have I done against you, and open themselves up to that, and accept responsibility for anything that had been done wrong. I like that accountability. Even if our pastors would stand up and say, is there anything that I've done at this point to wrong you, or to be unfair to you, and give people an opportunity? I think most of us would not want that sort of accountability. We would certainly be worried that all sorts of people hold things against us that we may not have even done wrong. And so we don't tend to open ourselves up that way. But I think if we knew we were going to do that, how would that change the way we led, perhaps, or the things that we did while we were in office, if you will. I really think that this is incredible transparency, authenticity, and vulnerability for Samuel to do this and open himself up. Number 4 says, what would happen if you asked the people around you, or those that God has called you to lead, to evaluate your character and actions like Samuel did? Well, each of us should ask this. If we're not in a leadership position in the church, I would ask, what would happen if anyone we have influence over, we opened ourselves up to this sort of criticism? What would happen if we ask our kids this? And I know that that's tough, and I know that if there are people that are immature, they would take that opportunity to really hurt us. and hold things against us that it's not fair, and perhaps even our children are not mature enough to, they have a lot of things against us sometimes, perhaps, um, that if, someday they will realize that we have not wronged them. If anything, we've done it right. But maybe we have wronged people. And if we have, isn't this a better thing to do than to leave that wrong unrectified? What if we've been unfair to our kids? What if we've been unfair to the people that we've led in the church? What if we've been wrong at times, and and we don't ask because we're not willing to admit that we're wrong ever? And I know people in the church that I'm quite confident have wronged people, leaders in the church who have wronged people in the church, but they don't feel like they have. At the time, maybe they didn't intend to, and that wasn't their intention, or they were immature at the time. And as they've matured, they've perhaps realized it. Maybe they haven't. Maybe their view of history is still very one-sided. But in my life, I look back and see that I was immature when I was young in leadership, and there are certainly things that people could bring against me that I'd have to say, yeah, that wasn't intentional. But I see that that I should have done that differently, and I could have done that better, and I see how I was hurtful, and maybe I was operating out of a place of pain. But I've seen leaders in the church who won't admit that, no matter how much distance they have from it, and how much they've matured since, they still won't admit that they were ever wrong. And there are broken relationships because of it, in their wake and in their past. And it is normal in our day and age to leave a trail of broken relationships. But God help us if that's our pattern in the church, because it should be normal for the world. The world lives in selfishness, and the world will leave a pattern of broken relationships and a trail behind them of broken relationships. But the people of God should do everything we can to restore relationships. If we've broken a relationship inadvertently, what can we do to heal it? Well, one thing is to open ourselves up and allow people to bring those things against us, so that we have an opportunity to make it right, and to apologize, and to repent. And but this is not popular. This is not common, and so I don't know how confident I am that this is going to become the way of things anytime soon. But I'd like to be able to do my part, and even just say that if there's somebody that holds something against me from the past, I would entertain a discussion with you. I'd invite you to bring it up with me, and we can talk about it. And it's likely that that with distance behind me, and in between me and that thing, that I might be able to say that I'm sorry, and I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but I see that. And I hope that by the time I'm done and I'm old and gray, as Samuel says, that I'm in a place where uh, I'm able to receive that. And I hope that all of those things that may have been held against me have been righted already by the time I get there, and I don't wait. So I would love for an opportunity to get to the end of life and ministry and look back and nobody have anything held against me. Because and that's not to say that I haven't ever done anything wrong and that's what I'm going. I mean, I wouldn't try to do anything wrong, but what I mean is, if we're able to make those things right and not allow that wedge to be driven for all these years, then by the time we get to the end, that's not there anymore because it's already been rectified. And that's my hope and my prayer for my life and for yours. So consider this and what you might do to be willing to receive criticism. We're not very good at that today. We get very defensive when we are criticized. People, in fact, if you open yourself up to be criticized like this, it's possible that nobody will open their mouth, even if there are things they're holding against you, because the last time they tried to share something with you, you did not receive it. You got defensive and tried to assert your own righteousness in the situation rather than to receive that you may have wronged somebody and be repentant about it. So we may have a long way to go for this to work. But a start would be to be willing to receive it and to respond in a way that is Christ-like and godly when somebody does bring something against us instead of trying to fight back. So number 5, what does Samuel say to the people of Israel in 12:6-22? A, he establishes a pattern from Israel's history. God saves them when they cry out, but eventually they forget about him. So he goes through history beginning with Egypt and Moses, and shows how God has saved them again and again, but they have eventually forgotten about the fact about what God had done for them. B, he points out that God saved them again and given them the king that they wanted. God has now given them Saul and saved them again from the hand of the Ammonites. So this just caps off all that God has done in the past. See, he uses these points to remind them, fear the Lord and serve and obey him and do not rebel against his commands. So he's much like what we'll be learning in Exodus. If you're with us and studying this at the same time, we're studying Exodus on Sundays right now. What we'll be learning in Exodus is that God calls them to follow his commands. He initiates relationship and covenant, but he calls them to respond in obedience. And so here is Samuel saying the same thing. The Lord has saved you. He's been faithful. Now it's your turn to obey his commands and don't rebel against him. D, he commanded thunder and rain from the Lord, though it was not the season for it, and the people were afraid and stood in awe of the Lord and of Samuel. So it was not the season when they should be receiving thunderstorms and rain. Yet he says, despite this is the harvest season, not the growing season. This is when everything dries out and is ready to be collected, not when it's still growing because of all the water. And yet there's going to be thunderstorms. They repented and asked for a king, repented for asking for a king. So after all this, they admitted that they had been wrong and repented. And then F, he gives them the answer despite their sin in the past. So number 6 says, what does Samuel tell the people after they repent in 12:20-21? Do not be afraid, Samuel replied. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not turn away after useless idols. They can do no good, nor can they rescue you because they are useless. So he says, despite you doing all this evil, don't be afraid and don't turn away. And so I think that's one of the things that's important about God's grace. And what we're going to talk about in this closing section of this text is really important, because Samuel basically describes how the people of God ought to respond to correction if you've been in sin, if you've rebelled, if you turned away from God, which the scripture says all of us have, our experience is all of us have. If you've done this, don't be afraid. No matter what you've done, God is reaching out to save you. So turn to him and serve him with all your heart. Don't turn away. See, our tendency is to give up in moments like that. But he says, don't give up. Don't turn away. God is saving you. No matter what you've done in the past, he wants to save you. So the answer right now is to turn to him with all your heart and don't turn away and give up. And then it says in 12:22, this is how does he say God will respond in 12:22? For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased to make you his own. So it says he's going to save you. He's not going to reject you. He's not going to do it because of what you've done. He's going to do it for the sake of his great name, so that he is shown to be who he has promised to be, a God who wants to be your God, and he wants you to be his people. And so, but you've got to turn back to him. This is the response. Don't turn away. Don't give up. Turn back to him. Now, all of this is important, because then it says, what does he say to them in 12:23? It says, as for me, far be it from me. So then he's talking about Samuel is going to take on the heart of God. He says, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you, and I will teach you the way that is good and right. So in other words, he says, God has not rejected you. God has chosen to forgive you. So far be it from me to refuse that forgiveness and not pray for you. So that pray is that intercession, that priestly duty of crying out to God on their behalf. So he says, far be it from me to give up on you when God hasn't. Now that's an important point for us. If we're talking about people that have turned away from God, that are under our influence or under our leadership, or that we know, that are our friends, that are our family, far be it from us to reject them when God is calling them back. So what happens if we don't go to God on their behalf when they're turning back to God and God has chosen to forgive them? What happens if we refuse to forgive them and fail to pray for them and intercede for them? Well, then Samuel says that would be a sin for us. And then he says, but be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully. So this number 8 says, how might we apply this to our lives as faithful servants of God? So we need to apply it as if we're in Samuel's position, that we refuse to hold grudges and choose not to forgive when God has forgiven. That's one. But the second thing is that we need to know, if we have fallen away from God, what the answer is. It's to serve him with all our heart. Don't give up. Don't turn away from him. Now, let's be clear in verse 24, when he says, be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. So he's saying, so the answer is not that, oh, he forgave me once, he'll forgive me again, he'll forgive me again, he'll forgive me again, but rather he has chosen to forgive me, so I will turn to him and not give up, and I will fear the Lord, which means care. We talked about this in our Exodus Bible study. If you're with us in that study, I will fear the Lord, and I will fear him more than anybody else, which means I will choose to do what he says, because I care more about what he thinks than I care about anything else, than I care about what anybody else thinks. So I will do what pleases him.
And so the answer is, if we've been given grace, and Paul calls back to this in New Testament, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace might increase? This is Romans chapter 6. By no means. We are those who have died to sin. So that is modeled right here in First Samuel in this text, when Samuel says, you've sinned, but the answer is to turn back to the Lord. Don't give up and go after other idols or whatever, just turn away from God entirely. He has chosen to forgive you. So the answer now is to turn to him, fear him, and serve him faithfully. And that's what we need to apply to our lives. First of all, if we have sinned, then that's how we ought to respond. Second of all, if we're leading others, this we need to call them to respond in this way. And then when they do, we should not hold grudges and refuse to forgive when God has forgiven. And this is important life application that, by the way, is not the way of the world, and it's not the way we've probably grown up or been taught to live our lives. And or maybe we've been taught with people's mouths, but something else has been modeled oftentimes. And so we need to consider how we might live differently as we respond to evil that has been done either in our lives or in the lives of others.